You walk around all day just entirely trusting your skin. Like, it functions as this ultimate biological border wall.
Right, because the assumption is incredibly simple. You know,
Yeah.
this side of the wall is you, and that side is the rest of the universe.
Exactly, and we rely on that. Evolutionarily speaking, if you don't actually believe your skin separates you from, say, a cliff edge, you don't survive very long.
No, you really don't. You need that boundary just to navigate the physical world.
Right, like if I stub my toe, I feel it. The chair doesn't feel it. It feels like a clean break. But when you zoom in on the actual mechanics of that interaction, it changes. Whether you're looking through quantum physics, deep ecology, or global philosophy, that border wall completely dissolves.
It really does. You start to realize you aren't a closed system at all. You're actually entirely porous.
Which is why today's deep dive into the law of divine oneness isn't going to be, some surface level conversation about good vibes or chanting in a circle.
Yeah, we're definitely going way past that today.
Because if you're listening to this, you probably already know the baseline concept, right? Essentially, everything seen and unseen stems from a unified field of infinite possibilities.
Right. That's the foundation of it.
But our mission for this deep dive is to look at the terrifying biological realities of that interconnectedness. So we're going to explore the literal quantum mechanics of physical touch. We'll look at the biophysics of how a synchronized group of minds in Washington, D.C. objectively altered violent crime
Which
rates.
is just an incredible study, by the way.
It is wild. And we'll also break down the philosophical architecture known as panentheism and look at why the realization of being connected to everything often triggers this feeling of pure existential body horror.
Because it's not a purely romantic concept, you know.
Mhm.
Merging with the unified field forces a total structural collapse of the ego.
Yeah. So by the end of this deep dive, you're going to understand exactly the mechanisms by which your private daily thoughts are actively physically hacking and shaping the collective reality around you.
It's a huge paradigm shift.
It really is. So let's start with the literal physical reality of our bodies. Because if we're going to claim separation is an illusion, we really have to start at the subatomic level.
We do. And the Smithsonian documentary, We Are All Stardust, gives us a really perfect baseline for this.
Oh, I loved this part of the sources.
Right. It maps out the literal atomic lineage of the human body. So every single carbon atom in your cells, every iron atom carrying oxygen through your blood, it was all forged inside the high-pressure furnace of ancient stars.
Stars that went supernova billions of years ago.
Exactly. You are essentially operating a biological machine constructed from the debris of the Big Bang. We are all utilizing the exact same cosmic puzzle pieces.
The implication there being that the universe isn't just like an environment we were dropped into, the universe grew us out of itself.
Yeah, like an apple tree growing an apple.
I love that image. But let's bring that massive cosmic scale down to the immediate sensation of physical touch. Because the sources highlight this fundamental principle of physics that just totally messes with your head.
Oh, the electron repulsion.
Yes. When you press your hand against a solid object, like the table in front of you, you are not actually making physical contact with it.
Well, not in the way your brain perceives it anyway. What's
Mhm.
actually happening is the electrons in the outer shell of your hand's atoms are coming into really close proximity with the electrons in the table's atoms.
Right?
And because they carry the same negative charge, they fiercely repel each other.
So they basically bounce off.
Essentially, yeah. And then your nervous system translates that electromagnetic repulsion into an electrical signal, sends it to your brain, and your brain just renders the sensation of touch.
So, like Albert Einstein pointed out, this whole human experience of feeling physically separate from the world around us is basically an optical delusion of consciousness.
That's a great way to put it. It's a translation error, almost.
But wait, hold on. If my electrons are literally repelling the table or repelling another person, that doesn't actually sound like oneness to me.
No.
No, that sounds like fundamental isolation. I mean, I'm basically an isolated magnet pushing the entire physical world away from me at all times.
Right. But see, that is the illusion of the sensory translation. To understand why that repulsion is actually the exact mechanism of oneness, we have to look at the ancient Hermetic principle of correspondence.
Right, which says, as above, so below, as within, so without.
Exactly. In the framework of physical reality, that electromagnetic repelling is not isolation. It's an active language. It's communication.
So kind of like two magnets resisting each other.
Precisely like that. If you hold two opposing magnets close together, they aren't isolated in a void. They're locked in a highly responsive dynamic tension.
Oh, I see. Because if you shift the angle of one magnet even a fraction of a millimeter, the other magnet instantly reacts.
Exactly. To exist in the physical universe means to be in this constant, unavoidable state of energetic exchange. You're vibrating at a specific frequency, and your field is constantly negotiating with the fields around you.
So you aren't just bouncing off a dead world.
No, you're in a continuous high-speed dialogue with it.
Wow. Okay, so the boundary isn't a wall separating two things. It's the interface where the conversation actually happens.
That is a perfect way to summarize it.
So if that is the physical reality of our atomic structure, I feel like it completely changes how we have to look at our minds.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Because consciousness isn't just this abstract, floaty concept. It is generated by those exact same interacting physical systems.
Right. So if our atoms are in constant dialogue with the environment, our consciousness must be doing the exact same thing.
It has to be. And this is where the sources dive into the concept of the hive mind and whether this collective consciousness can actually be empirically measured.
And it can be, right? I mean, look at the Global Consciousness Project.
Yes, initiated by Roger D. Nelson, the methodology they used was honestly brilliant. They placed these random number generators all over the globe.
Which are basically just sophisticated machines designed to spit out zeros and ones in a totally unpredictable, chaotic sequence.
Right. The whole idea was to establish a baseline of pure mechanical randomness.
But the data shifted when human attention synchronized.
Dramatically. The researchers found that during massive, highly emotional global events, I think the most significant one being the attacks on September 11th, these machines just stopped being random.
That is still so hard to wrap my head around.
I know. They showed statistically significant deviations. They started producing ordered sequences of numbers.
So the burning question is the mechanism. Like, how does human emotion dictate the algorithm of a machine thousands of miles away?
Well, the leading hypothesis points to a localized structuring of the quantum field. When millions of human nervous systems experience the exact same intense emotional frequency simultaneously, it creates this massive coherent resonance in the collective electromagnetic field.
So everyone is suddenly broadcasting on the exact same channel.
Basically, yeah. And this coherence essentially reduces entropy in the surrounding environment. So the chaotic, random physical systems of those machines became briefly ordered by the sheer density of that synchronized human consciousness.
Which totally moves this out of the realm of philosophy and right into measurable biophysics.
Exactly. It's measurable data.
And if global trauma can unintentionally structure the field like that, the Washington, D.C. Transcendental Meditation Study from 1993 shows us what happens when we do it intentionally.
That study is a game changer.
It is. Researchers mobilized 4,000 highly trained meditators to Washington, D.C. for 2 months, and their only task was to meditate daily in synchronized groups.
Right. They weren't interacting with the community. They weren't out patrolling the streets, just meditating.
Just meditating. And during that period, the maximum weekly decrease in violent crime was 23.3%, with an overall drop of 15.6%.
And we should note, the statistical rigor applied to that data was intense. They controlled for weather variables, police deployment, historical crime trends, everything.
So the only anomaly was the presence of a synchronized group generating a highly coherent state of consciousness.
Yep, that was the only changing variable.
I mean, I look at that 23.3% drop, and I have to ask how the signal actually reaches the recipient. Because, you know, a skeptic could argue this is just the reticular activating system at work.
Oh, sure, the old you see what you want to see argument.
Exactly. Like, if I consciously focus my brain on looking for peace, my biological filter shifts, and I start noticing peaceful interactions and just ignoring the negative ones, I change my perception, not the world.
Right. But this study measured objective police reports, not the subjective feelings of the meditators.
Right. So the meditators' focus must have somehow hacked the biological systems of the actual criminals on the street.
And to map that mechanism, we have to look at the research of Dr. Joe Dispenza, specifically his book, Becoming Supernatural.
Okay, let's get into that.
So the reticular activating system is your internal filter, yes. But Dispenza focuses on what happens externally. The subconscious mind does not know the difference between an external physical event and a vivid, internally rehearsed emotional state.
So if you vividly imagine a stressful scenario, your brain triggers the release of cortisol as if the threat is literally standing right in front of you.
Exactly. Your body physically becomes the environment you are visualizing. And when your biological state changes, the electromagnetic field emitted by your heart and brain changes.
And the heart generates a really strong field, right?
Oh, it's thousands of times stronger than the brain's field. So when 4,000 people enter a state of deep, intentional physiological coherence, they are broadcasting an incredibly powerful, stabilized electromagnetic signature.
And because of the law of divine oneness, we know we're all existing inside a shared conductive environment.
Precisely, that stabilized field of peace ripples out and literally begins to downregulate the chaotic fight-or-flight autonomic nervous systems of the people in the surrounding geography.
Wow. So the people committing crimes were physically interacting with the coherent electromagnetic field of the meditators, and their own nervous systems just calmed down without them ever realizing why.
That's the implication, yes.
Yeah. That fundamentally redefines privacy. I mean, a private thought isn't just internal data anymore. It's an active contribution to the collective atmospheric pressure.
It's a huge responsibility when you really think about it.
It is. Which kind of brings us to the architectural problem. If my brain's electromagnetic field is physically altering the hive mind, that implies we're all operating inside a shared, highly conductive environment.
Right.
So what is the actual structure of that environment?
Well, to answer that structural question, we look to a philosophical framework called panentheism.
Okay, let's break that down.
The term was actually coined in the 19th century by the philosopher Karl Kraus. He was wrestling with this exact problem of physics and spirit, trying to find the bridge between strict naturalism and supernaturalism.
So what does panentheism actually mean?
It translates directly to all in God. It posits that the physical world exists entirely within the unified field, or source, and that source permeates everything in the world, but the source is ultimately infinitely larger and more complex than the physical world itself.
Let's distinguish that from pantheism really quick. Because pantheism basically says the universe itself is the totality of God. Like the trees, the rocks, the stars, that is the entire boundary of the divine.
Right. Pantheism equates the universe and God as the exact same thing.
And then classical theism views the creator as entirely separate. Like an engineer who builds a clock, winds it up, and then just exists outside of it.
Exactly. So panentheism occupies this really elegant space between them, and it relies on a systems theory concept known as emergence.
Emergence, right?
Yeah, in biology and physics, when smaller parts combine, they create an emergent system that is exponentially greater than the sum of its parts. Like individual neurons are not conscious, right?
Right.
But a complex network of billions of neurons creates the emergent property of human consciousness.
And emergence allows for top-down causation.
Yes. The higher emergent level can dictate the actions of the lower levels. Like your conscious thought, which is a high-level emergent phenomenon, can send a signal down to your physical hand to pick up a glass of wire.
It basically rewrites the behavior of the lower-level biological hardware.
Exactly. So panentheism suggests the unified field is the ultimate highest level of emergent organization. It acts as the operating system, basically capable of causing changes downward into the lower-level physical mechanics of the universe.
The theologian Sally McFaig used this great metaphor of the world functioning as God's body.
It's a really powerful image.
And this isn't just a modern Western construct either. The 10th century Hindu philosopher Abhinavagupta outlined a very similar architecture. But let's actually test the durability of this idea, because Sigmund Freud heavily criticized this entire concept.
Oh, he really did.
Yeah, he labeled the feeling of being one with the universe, the oceanic feeling, and just dismissed it entirely as a regression. Like it was just an infantile psychological desire to return to the safety of the womb and escape the responsibilities of individual life.
Freud viewed the dissolution of the ego as an intellectual weakness, basically.
Right, so let me offer an analogy to see if panentheism actually holds up against Freud's critique.
Okay, let's hear it.
So if pantheism is a drop of water saying, I am the ocean, pantheism feels more like a sea sponge living at the bottom of the ocean.
Oh, I like this.
Right. The sponge is completely saturated. The ocean flows through every pore and cell of its body. But the ocean is vastly larger, deeper, and more complex than the sponge.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the balance panentheism strikes between immanence and transcendence. The ocean is totally immanent. It is the very substance flowing through the sponge.
But it is also transcendent.
Exactly, existing far beyond the sponge's capacity to comprehend.
And crucially, pushing back against Freud's argument, the sponge maintains its own structural integrity. It still has edges.
And that is the vital counter to Freud. Panentheism preserves autonomy. The sponge has a semi-permeable boundary and must still interact with its local environment.
So you are deeply embedded in the unified field, but you retain localized agency.
Right. Which is the only way to reconcile the existence of chaotic or harmful actions in a unified system. A localized node like a human being
Mhm.
has the freedom to operate out of alignment with the harmony of the whole.
You're participating in the divine field, but you're still responsible for your own local behavior.
Exactly.
It's such an elegant architecture. We have the shared stardust, the measurable quantum coherence, the cosmic sponge. It all paints a deeply harmonious picture.
It does.
But, and here is the twist in our sources, while the theory of oneness sounds incredibly liberating, the actual visceral experience of giving up the individual ego and realizing you are permanently merged with the environment is, for a lot of people, pure psychological terror.
Yeah, we have this deep cultural tendency to romanticize the dissolution of boundaries. Like, look at Walt Whitman, whose poetry celebrated the ecstatic influx and efflux of nature.
He idealized the sensation of his identity just bleeding out into the dirt, the trees, and the people around him.
He treated oneness like this beautiful exhalation into the cosmos. But if you read the writer D.H. Lawrence's reaction to Whitman's poetry, it is one of profound disgust.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Lawrence recoiled at the idea of forced universal intimacy. He essentially stated, I do not want all of those things inside of me.
Which, honestly, given the biology we just discussed, is a highly rational response.
It really is.
If we are completely porous, if the ocean is literally flowing through the sponge, that means we are contaminated by the world.
Contaminated is a good word for it.
The philosopher Dylan Trigg explores this in what he calls the phenomenology of horror. He points out that an honest look at our own physical bodies completely shatters the comfortable illusion of an independent self.
Because you are kept alive by inner aliens.
Right. The trillions of microbes in your gut, the foreign plant and animal matter you ingest and assimilate, the ancient viral DNA spliced into our evolutionary genome. You are not a singular entity. You are a walking, breathing ecosystem.
Richard M. Doyle coined a term for this specific psychological shock. He calls it the ecodelic insight.
Ecodelic insight.
Okay, it's the sudden, jarring realization of your dense, inescapable imbrication with the ecosystem. And Doyle notes that this triggers a feeling of exocentricity.
What does that mean exactly?
It's the terrifying sensation that the center of your being is actually located somewhere outside of yourself.
Oh, wow.
Right. For an ego that has spent its entire existence believing it is this autonomous, self-made captain of its own ship, that realization feels like a hostile takeover.
It sounds identical to the body horror genre in cinema, like John Carpenter's film The Thing.
Yes, exactly.
The terror comes from the realization that the biological border wall has been breached, and you can no longer tell where you end and the alien biology begins.
It's deeply unsettling.
But wait, if the goal of spiritual growth is enlightenment, shouldn't we be trying to transcend this messy parasitic meat suit we live in? Why should we accept that we are just a porous sack of foreign microbes?
Well, the desire to escape the body is exactly what psychoanalysis predicts we would feel. Jacques Lacan's theory of the mirror stage explains the origin of this horror perfectly.
Okay, take me through the mirror stage.
So, when a human infant is born, its experience is pure chaos. It's just a jumble of uncoordinated limbs, intense physical needs, and total sensory overload. It has absolutely no concept of a self.
Just raw data.
Right. But at a certain developmental stage, usually when viewing themselves in a mirror or observing how caregivers react to them as a distinct entity, the infant constructs an I. It builds a unified, coherent image of itself to mask the chaotic biological reality.
So we invent the border wall of the ego simply to survive the overwhelming data of existence.
Exactly. The ego is just a necessary survival interface. So when you truly encounter the law of divine oneness, it directly attacks that interface.
It tells the ego that its walls are a fiction.
Yes. And that it is hopelessly entangled with the dirt, the bacteria, and the chaotic collective mind of billions of other humans. And the ego processes that information as a literal death threat.
Because the illusion of independence is the only thing keeping the ego alive.
Yes. Lacan and other theorists referred to the messy biological realities of life as the abject.
The abject, like bodily fluids in decay.
Exactly. The aspects of nature we try to expel and hide from view to maintain our clean illusion of self. The urge to purely transcend the physical realm, to escape into some sterile, detached spiritual vacuum, is often diagnosed by psychoanalysts as a narcissistic defense mechanism.
Wow.
You want the power of a god, completely insulated from the mud of reality.
You basically want to be the classical theist's clockmaker, standing safely outside the house you built, rather than the sponge forced to filter the murky water of the ocean.
Precisely. A mature integration of the law of divine oneness demands the surrender of that narcissistic control.
You have to face the mud.
You really do. It requires you to confront the abject and joyfully accept that you are beautifully, inextricably, and messily entangled with the entirety of existence. You cannot have the transcendent unity without the biological mud.
That completely flips the paradigm of what it means to be a spiritual being.
It really grounds it in reality.
So how do we integrate this blueprint? The law of divine oneness isn't just a poetic affirmation. It is the objective reality of your electrons communicating through repulsion.
It's the literal carbon of ancient stars circulating in your veins.
Right. It's the measurable capacity of your coherent heart rate to downregulate the nervous system of a stranger. And it is the terrifying, beautiful reality of your microbiological entanglement with the ecosystem.
And because that interconnectedness is the foundational architecture of reality, it acts as the ignition system for the other universal laws.
Primarily the law of action and the law of cause and effect.
Exactly. The illusion of a vacuum just does not exist.
You are always broadcasting into the unified field. Every thought of empathy, every fixation on fear, every moment of generosity you engage in today creates an immediate physical ripple effect in the conductive environment we all share.
The responsibility is absolute.
It is. You have to evaluate what frequency you are actively choosing to pump into the cosmic sponge.
The choice is whether you let your ego dictate a frequency of isolation and defense, or whether you consciously align your field with the reality of connection.
As we wrap up today's deep dive, we want to leave you with one final conceptual application of this science to consider.
This is something you can actually try.
Yeah. We unpacked how the subconscious mind physically cannot distinguish between a real event and a highly emotional visualization. We also looked at how focused human intention can restructure the random data of the physical world, much like entangled quantum particles communicating instantaneously across vast distances without traversing physical space.
The signal simply transfers, rendering distance irrelevant.
So apply that to your own life. What happens if tonight, as you cross the threshold into sleep, you intentionally hold a vivid, emotionally resonant vision of a profoundly healed and peaceful world?
In a universe governed by the law of divine oneness, your individual mind is a highly conductive node permanently wired into the collective network.
So whose chaotic nervous system on the other side of the planet might suddenly calm down while you sleep? We spend our entire lives violently defending the border wall of our skin. But the most radical, powerful act of your life might simply be accepting that the wall was never actually there.